The entire school froze the moment the black helicopter appeared, its blades slicing through the sky like judgment. As dust spiraled across the baseball field, a man in a flawless suit stepped out and demanded one thing: Eli Dawson. Within minutes, the boy they used to laugh at was called to the office and handed a folder that silenced the entire building. Mr. Hayden, the same teacher who humiliated him in front of everyone, could barely speak. But what happened next will shock even those who thought they'd seen everything. But first, let's go back to the beginning. The smell of chalk dust mixed with the faint scent of floor wax as light filtered through the slatted blinds of room 3B, catching in the fibers of Eli Dawson's worn flannel. He sat in the back, not to avoid attention. Attention found him regardless, but because it was the only place where he could breathe without feeling the weight of stares burrowing into the back of his neck. The classroom wasn't just a room for learning. For Eli, it was a place where his last name was a stain, where dirt under his nails translated to deficiency, where his silence was mistaken for stupidity instead of quiet endurance. Mr. Hayden stood at the front of the class like a man delivering gospel, one hand gesturing toward a whiteboard filled with terms like ambition and discipline. He paced with deliberate flair, the heels of his polished Oxfords tapping rhythmically on the linoleum. His tie was straight, his voice sharper than a cattle prod, and his ego fit too snugly in the room. When the door creaked and Eli entered, shoulders drawn, hair still damp from a rushed bucket rinse at the barn spigot, time seemed to pause. A smear of dried blood stained the cuff of his sleeve, from the calf he helped birth just before dawn, and the mud on his boots cracked as he walked. The silence didn't come from awe. It came from judgment, like the room had inhaled collectively, holding its breath until Hayden gave them permission to laugh. The teacher didn't miss a beat. "Late again, Dawson," he declared, voice slicing through the classroom like wind across barbed wire. "Didn't realize cows were more important than calculus." Eli's jaw tightened, but he didn't answer. He slipped into his seat, every movement deliberate, as if trying to shrink himself into the plastic chair. Hayden smirked. Of course. What would a ranch hand need calculus for? Planning manure piles? A few students chuckled. Some didn't. Some just looked away, too cowardly to laugh, too gutless to defend. The silence that followed felt like molasses poured over broken glass, slow, thick, and cutting. Principal Dale stood at the door, arms crossed. His eyes met Hayden's briefly, then glanced at Eli. He said nothing, made no gesture, just scribbled something on a clipboard and turned away. And in that moment, Eli didn't cry. He didn't speak. He simply stared down at his desk, the calluses on his fingers pressed against the cheap laminate. Inside, a fire flickered, not bright enough yet to roar, but hot enough to stay alive. The screen door creaked against the frame as the wind pushed through the Dawson farmhouse, carrying the scent of dry alfalfa and the metallic tinge of old rain clinging to parched dirt. Inside, the kitchen was dim, the single bulb above the table flickering with the mood of the room. The stew on the stove had gone cold. Eli hadn't touched his bowl. He sat hunched near the window, his forearm braced on the sill, his gaze locked onto the darkening outline of the field beyond, the field he'd helped tend since he was old enough to lift a hay bale. Jack Dawson watched his son without a word for a long while. The boy's silence was different tonight. It wasn't tiredness. It wasn't hunger. It was something more deeply worn, like a bruise you can't see, only feel when it pulses. "You all right, son?" Jack's voice broke the stillness, low and careful, like stepping onto thin ice. Eli didn't turn. "They treat me like I'm dirt, Dad," he said finally. "Like I walked straight out of the mud and brought the stink with me. Like I ain't got a mind in my head just 'cause I wear boots and don't speak up." Jack nodded slowly, as if he'd been waiting for those words for years. He walked over to the table and picked up a thick white envelope, creased at the edges, the paper heavy with embossed lettering. A law firm's seal in black ink stared back like it held secrets it didn't care to explain. "You remember your mom's brother?" Jack asked, thumbing the flap open. "Uncle Henry," Eli replied. "The tech guy. Moved to California, never came back." Jack unfolded the letter. "He passed last week," he said, his voice catching slightly. "Didn't tell us he was sick." Eli turned. Jack placed the letter in front of him. There was the formal language of lawyers and estates, of assets and trusts and executorship. But it wasn't the paragraphs that held Eli's eyes. It was the scrawl at the bottom, handwritten, tilted and imperfect. "To Eli. I never had a son, but your mother said you were the kind of boy who didn't give up, even when life kicked you down. You're my heir now. Don't let the world define you. Define it yourself." Eli stared at the words. They felt like a hand on the shoulder, firm, unexpected, and real. He didn't feel proud, not yet. He felt a different kind of ache, the kind that didn't come from being poor but from being unseen for so long that you forget how it feels to matter. "What does it mean?" he asked. Jack didn't rush the answer. "It means he saw something in you," he said, "and he left you everything because of it." Eli said nothing, but something shifted in the silence. Not joy, not yet. Just the faintest sense that the story wasn't over, not for him. The sound arrived before the shape did, a deep mechanical tremor that rolled across Clear Ridge High like a gathering storm. Ceiling tiles vibrated, pens danced on desktops, the windows quivered in their frames. For a moment, students froze, unsure whether it was an earthquake or something far stranger. Then came the shadow, long and sharp, sweeping over the quad like the wing of a dark bird. When the first of the spinning blades came into view, chaos bloomed. "Is that a helicopter?" someone whispered. Within seconds, chairs scraped back and sneakers thundered toward the windows. Faces pressed against glass, eyes wide with disbelief. There, cutting through the morning sun, was a sleek obsidian black chopper descending with surgical precision onto the school's dusty baseball diamond. Its sides gleamed like polished stone, unmarked, unbranded, the way expensive things often are. In the hallway, Principal Dale had gone pale. His clipboard clattered to the floor as he stood frozen, jaw slack, watching the aircraft settle on school property like it owned the place. The wind kicked up by the rotors peeled papers off bulletin boards and scattered them like startled birds. The side hatch hissed open. From the belly of the machine stepped a man in a tailored navy suit, shoes sharp enough to pierce concrete. His coat barely shifted in the wind. In one hand, he carried a matte black briefcase. In the other, a small ivory envelope. His expression was unreadable, too composed, too precise. A man built for rooms of glass and steel, not school corridors that still smelled like bleach and middle school fear. He didn't glance at the students, didn't flinch at the silence. He walked straight into the front office and placed a business card on the reception counter with the certainty of someone who had never been told no. "I'm here for Eli Dawson," he said. "Please page him immediately." A soft beep echoed through the halls. Then the PA crackled. "Eli Dawson, please report to the main office." Every head turned, every voice hushed. Eli stood from his desk like the air around him had changed. His feet moved steadily down the hallway, through rows of slack jaws and blinking eyes. Even Mr. Hayden, who had so often used silence as a weapon, stood mute. Inside the office, the man handed him a folder. "Sir," he said, loud and clear, "the board of Dawson Innovations welcomes its new primary shareholder. You have a board meeting Tuesday." Your uncle left you controlling interest in a $300 million firm." The room didn't gasp. It exhaled. Hayden stepped forward, pale and shrinking. "Eli, I didn't know." Eli met his eyes with the weight of every insult. "That's the problem," he said evenly. "You never tried to." And then, with the calm of someone who no longer had anything to prove, he turned and walked back to class. In the weeks that followed the helicopter's descent, Clear Ridge High School became a living study in reversal. Whispers clung to lockers like static electricity. The same students who once rolled their eyes at Eli's muddy boots now offered him polite nods in the hallway, cautious greetings in class, like they were approaching royalty in denim. Some tried to make conversation. Others tripped over apologies disguised as jokes. Even the football captain, who'd once scoffed at Eli for riding to school in a rusted-out pickup, now complimented his grit. But Eli didn't return the smiles, didn't reach for the handshakes. He answered when spoken to. He finished assignments. He stayed in his lane. Because what had shifted inside him wasn't ego. It was clarity. The same kids who laughed were now watching him, not because he had changed, but because the world around him had finally been forced to see who he was all along. Mr. Hayden, once smug behind his podium, requested a private conversation, just to clear the air. Eli politely declined. Principal Dale sent a formal invitation to Jack Dawson, asking him to attend the next PTA meeting to discuss Eli's exciting future. Jack read the letter once, folded it neatly, and tossed it in the fire. Eli remained at Clear Ridge by choice. He could have left, could have enrolled in some private academy with $10 pens and blazers that came with embossed crests. But he stayed, not out of defiance, but out of purpose. He finished every class, sat through every lecture, answered every test question with quiet precision. Not because he had something to prove. He didn't. He stayed because his presence became its own lesson, louder than any bell or textbook. On the final day of the semester, Eli stood before the school in the same weathered flannel shirt and the boots with caked-on mud still stubborn in the seams. The auditorium was full. Cameras clicked, but he didn't speak for the headlines. "I used to think being poor meant being less," he began. "That success was about money, about looking the part. But real success—" He paused, letting the silence sharpen his next words. "Real success is when you stop letting others tell you what you're worth and start defining it for yourself." He never said Billionaire, never mentioned the company. He didn't need to. The message hung in the air heavier than applause. After graduation, Eli quietly built bridges. He funded scholarships for kids whose hands smelled of diesel and hay, created internships for those who knew more about fence lines than stock markets, and when the helicopter returned now and then, slicing through the sky over Clear Ridge, it never came to impress. It came to remind that respect, true respect, wasn't earned through wealth, but through how you treat the people who have none.